Hey guys, happy Wally Wednesday. It's Alex from Wollaston Real Estate Investments, and we are at our very first new construction project in Chelsea, Massachusetts. This is 19 Suffolk Street. This is a building that's been in planning and preparation and now construction for a long time. We're loving this project, and we just got all of our steel up. This thing is pretty much a fortress, but I wanted to have Harrison walk you through some of the things that we've learned and some of the setbacks that we've experienced. We're actually about 6 months behind on this project, but we've learned a ton from this experience. So I figured let's have Harrison share with you some of those ups and downs that we've experienced so far. So hopefully you guys can learn from it if you end up doing a new construction project. And yeah, it's just another step to make us a little bit better as developers.
Yeah, our goal is to be completely an open book. As people who know me know, I'm a terrible liar. So we wanted to show you some of our genuine mistakes and some of the things that we just didn't know before we started working on this project.
It's the price to pay.
Yeah, as Alex said, this was our first new construction project and our first project involving steel as well. And as you can see, it's not just a little bit, it was a whole lot. So some of those mistakes that we may have made on a smaller steel project were just magnified over the size of all the steel that was installed here in 19 Suffolk Street. So let's go over here to one of our steel to foundation connections, which is where our primary mistakes lie, and I'll go through some of the technicalities of it with you.
Boom.
All right, I am down here in our crawl space at 19 Suffolk. I figured this would be an easier way for me to point at these babies here. These are our anchor bolts. So this is where our primary problem began. Now these anchor bolts, typically the way you connect your foundation to your steel, your base plates here, is these anchor bolts are supposed to be embedded into your concrete, meaning they are set in place prior to your foundation walls being poured, and when the concrete hardens around it, these bolts are then embedded in place. And we work with a surveyor to ensure they are in the exact right place, so that when the steel is hoisted, that they hoist these base plates right on top of these anchor bolts. Now, what actually happened is we missed a detail where we tried to set these anchor bolts a little higher at this height, which this foundation width is only about 7.5 inches, and the base plates were wider than that. So we made a crucial error, which we didn't realize until after the concrete was poured and hardened, and the anchor bolts were set at the wrong height, and due to the width of this part of the foundation and the base plates being wider, the anchor bolts kind of set at an angle. And that was our sign that we'd made a mistake. So we investigated, we figured out what we'd done wrong, and actually what we needed to do was we needed to pocket this section of the foundation and set our anchor bolts at an area where the foundation wall was wide enough to support the width of the base plate for the steel. And if we had set them lower, then we would have had the width in the foundation for them to be directly vertical and straight up and down. So because the foundation is now poured and hardened, our only option would be to either rip out all the concrete of this foundation and redo it, which actually would have been a lot faster, but it would have been more expensive. So what we opted to do instead is come up with a re-engineered design with a new anchor bolt size and a new anchor bolt depth, so that we could, they call dowel or drill down into our foundation wall and set our anchor bolts with epoxy instead of them being embedded in the concrete. Now with this new design, we had to spend some time with the engineer redesigning a new base plate size, because now that we're actually drilling and epoxying the bolts into place to hit a required strength for the entire steel setup, we had to then use larger anchor bolts, drill them down deeper than the original depth of embedment, and epoxy them in, which acts as the glue essentially to hold these bolts into place. But we had to work with the engineers, they said, to redesign it to a new depth and a new size, and then spend the time to cut out this section of the foundation wall. As you can see, it's kind of jagged from a slightly imperfect cut. This is purely cosmetic, so not really a big deal here. But we cut our walls down to the size appropriate for the base plates, then drilled down 20 inches for each hole. Now there's 8 holes on each of these base plates, and there was 8 of them. So the guy spent about 4 days drilling these down, 20 inches each, then setting the new anchor bolt sizes in, and then our steel company was able to come in and take over. They epoxied these new anchor bolts in place, and then brought all the steel on site and began hoisting it and setting it all in place. So sounds pretty straightforward, which now that we know, it actually is. But because this was our first job and my first job as a construction manager at a new construction, working with this amount of steel and working with these types of essentially this scope of work for a project like this, I was really just learning as I went, which was a large price to pay. But ultimately, I know and we know that we'll be better for this in the long term. And we're working with some steel now on some future projects, and it's just clicking just like that. So that was kind of the technical part of how all this came to be. And that process, as everyone knows, things always take longer than you would expect. So that entire process took us an extra 6 months between figuring out the issue, going through all the redesigns with the engineers, all of the new surveying to set our anchor bolts in the exact right place because we had to cut them out, resizing all of the base plates, and refabricating some steel parts, and then getting it all here and getting it hoisted. So hope that made a lot of sense to you guys. If anyone is in construction and in the industry or made any sort of similar mistake with a steel to foundation connection like this, you'll feel my pain. But we've got it all up now, so we'll take it as a lesson learned and move forward. So now we've just got wood framing, and the rest of this just feels entirely easy. So this project should wrap up here in the next probably 6 to 8 months, and almost about the time that it takes just to get our steel up. So thanks for tuning in.